Well, the dream of the Steam Deck console just got a lot more real because Valve just trademarked the Steam Frame. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck, and I'm excited. I just recorded a 3-topic news video. I sat down to edit it. I refreshed Twitter, and I see a bunch of tweets talking about the Steam Frame just getting a trademark filed, and I was like, okay, I'll do my due diligence. I'll read through it, and if you just read the top line, it's very obvious that the Steam Frame is trademarking for computer hardware, and then they go into detail basically laying out the parts of a computer. So I don't think there's any other way to read this than being about this Steam Deck console we've been hearing about for what feels like years at this point. Now, the timing on this is a little bit tricky because unfortunately, depending on how you feel, it lends credence to those specs that we saw show up on Geekbench where, you know, I did a video all about it, so I won't get too deeply into it, and I'm not the most spec-minded person, but it was a lot of old hardware they were using, and it wasn't even on the level of something like a base PS5. They had a CPU that had the iGPU disabled. They had 8 gigabytes of RAM, which I've talked about a lot not being enough. Like, they just did the Steam hardware survey, and 32 gigs of RAM is finally about to overtake 16 gigabytes of RAM. So, you know, only having 8 gigabytes of RAM in a device that's going to connect to your TV is just not enough in 2025, but it also had a dedicated GPU that was very old tech. So it just didn't really seem right that that was showing up on Geekbench, and there was no confirmation that it was someone from Valve. It could have been old tech. I reached out to my friend Tom from Moore's Law is Dead, and he was like, it would be less cost effective for them to use tech that old for the GPU than using a technically on paper less powerful RDNA 5 GPU that's coming out very soon. So everything was leading me to believe that it wasn't real, and the timing just doesn't really help out because if that shows up on Geekbench, then they trademark the Steam Frame. That kind of leads me to believe that that might be the actual device we end up seeing. We don't have any confirmation. The test was ran in Taiwan, so that's a little weird. Someone could have bought it on eBay. It could have made its way overseas somehow. The point is, it wasn't someone from Valve, as far as I'm aware, that logged this thing in Geekbench. And if that is one of the models that comes out, and they do offer higher performance models, I don't think it matters too much as long as they hit the price point of like $300 or $350 and have a more expensive, more powerful version for people who want that. Because as much as people love going for the $399 Steam Deck, it's a great price point for what you get out of it. Most people who bought a Steam Deck went for the most expensive model with both revisions. They went for the most expensive LCD model, and then when the Steam Deck OLED came out, the vast majority of people bought the 1 terabyte version, even though it is very simple to just take the back off and upgrade the SSD. A lot of people just want the best option available, and they're willing to spend the money to get it. So I think releasing just one version of this thing at a super low price point is only smart if they also have a high-end version that runs SteamOS, has the exact same chassis, has all the same capabilities, but is more powerful and can run Unreal Engine 5 games. Because that's the white whale apparently every console and PC under the sun has to chase now, because it's just too powerful of an engine for modern hardware. If this is the first time you're hearing about the Steam Frame, you'll be happy to know that there's an evolution of the Steam controller coming along with it. I think the Steam controller was great for what it was, but the new version looks so much better. It's like the reverse of the PlayStation Portal, where with the Portal, they took a DualSense, they cut it in half, they shrunk it down, and put an 8-inch tablet screen in between the two halves. This is like if you took the screen off of the Steam Deck and just took the two controllers and mashed them together. You get everything from the back buttons to the Steam button to the share button to the 3 dots button to the trackpads. Everything that's in the layout of the Steam Deck is accounted for, and that's great because as someone who has a Steam machine set up upstairs, I've been able to get around it without a mouse just using a controller by using the built-in Steam input features, but having the trackpads would go so much of an extra mile for me personally, just being able to have that fine control of the mouse for doing things like setting up EmuDeck, watching YouTube videos, downloading abandonware games. Like, having the precise control of a mouse just makes everything so much easier, and having those two touchpads on the controller really helps in that endeavor. Another thing that could be good if this is an evolved model of what showed up on Geekbench is that they built a custom chassis for it and a custom motherboard. So that's basically so they can cram everything down into a console sized package, because, you know, PCs, one of their biggest downfalls, especially if you want to use one in the living room, is that if you have a wife, they don't want a big bulky computer sitting underneath your TV. So you can't really put it in an entertainment center because they need air to cool them down because the parts are running so hot. So you can buy better cases that have wood grain on them, but still, I got my wife to meet me in the middle and we put it next to our entertainment center, but like, like if you walk in the room, you can immediately notice the PC even without its LED lights on or whatever, right? Like it's kind of unsightly for my wife and probably your wife, if we're being honest. So packing everything down into the size of the console makes sense for PC gamers who want to plug it into their TV, but it also makes sense to capture some of the people who are kind of stuck on consoles like the PS5, the Xbox Series X, maybe even the Nintendo Switch 2. You want it to look like what it is. So like, even though at its heart, it's going to be a PC that can use a keyboard and mouse, use a monitor or whatever, you could use it that way on your desk if you wanted to. The ideal situation for whatever this is probably going to be plugging it into your TV. So you don't want it taking up your entire entertainment center, or, you know, roughly being the size of an entertainment center all on its own. Another thing that I like is that they're going down the route of using a dedicated GPU. Like they have a semi-custom CPU that they developed with AMD, but instead of doing what consoles do or the Steam Deck does, which is use an APU, which is one chip that has it split between the CPU and GPU, they're disabling the GPU half and using a separate piece that can be plugged into this thing, which makes it upgradable. So like if I could take the 9070 XT out of my PC and put it in there and get even better performance, not only would that be good overall because I get better performance, but it adds to the longevity of this thing and kind of solves a major problem with PC gaming, which is, depending on how much money you have, the life cycle of PC parts, whether they last long or not, is kind of shorter than what you'd see out of a console. On a console like a PS4 or PS5, it's like 8 to 10 years if you really want to penny pinch. On a PC, you can stretch it that far, but they're much quicker to abandon features and leave GPUs behind. So like, even if you want to hang on to them for longer than the companies would probably want you to, they'll put barriers up to stop you from doing it. So being able to upgrade this thing on the fly would be a huge boon overall for the product itself. And they could take this a step further and use it as a reference device for other manufacturers, sort of like the Steam Deck became. The Steam Deck has an equivalent with Lenovo. They made the Legion Go S in 2 flavors. The white version runs Windows, the purple version runs SteamOS. You could see that working exactly the same way for pre-built desktops, and that could actually make a dent in what Windows is trying to do with the Xbox full screen platform. And I don't want Windows to fail because I use Windows every day because of multiplayer gaming. I just want it to be better. So if they keep one-upping each other with better features, better performance, and everything else, they're just going to keep getting better over time through that competition, and I think that's good. As for when this thing could be revealed, I mean, I talked about this already a little bit, but the trademark being filed right now is a good sign that we might be seeing it by the end of the year. Like, I don't know, that would be awesome to get new Steam Deck tech in 2025. And most importantly, it would make the wait for the Steam Deck 2, if it is going to take until 2028, just feel a little less long because you break it up with more hardware in between. And I think what they really need to go along with this thing is, of course, a killer app. It ended up being Elden Ring for the original Steam Deck, and there was a Aperture Desk Job, but like, a lot of people get mad when I don't mention that. The reason I don't mention it is because it's kind of forgettable. It's a 30-minute experience that you could download for free on your Steam Deck, and you learn the controls and the minutia of using SteamOS, but it's not an actual game. Like, it has game elements, but it's not like a true Valve game. So if they announce this thing alongside Half-Life 3, which is also heavily rumored to be almost done, I think that could be the big coming out moment a lot of Steam Deck fans, myself included, have been waiting for, and I just hope Valve nails it. I definitely recommend checking out Dustin's video because we covered this too, but it feels like Valve has just been waiting it out, right? Like, they're waiting for Xbox to kind of trip and fall, which they did with the Xbox Series X. That was like an extended fall in slow motion between the Xbox One generation and then the Series X. Sony is in a weird spot right now because they're raising the price of every PS5 by $50 for like the second or third time. They're also reducing the storage of the PS5 Slim back to 825 gigabytes from the 1 terabyte they got to with the Slim. Yeah, that's right. And Nintendo's having issues of their own with the performance of the Switch 2 and the high price of it. They've also had to raise the price of the Gen 1 Switch. Dev kits aren't getting out there to developers to the point where Nintendo's telling them to develop for Switch 1 and just rely on backwards compatibility for the Switch 2. So everyone's kind of like running around trying to put out fires, and Valve has everything together. So if they come out with new hardware, they're kind of catching people at the peak of frustration with console gaming, and that could be a big enough push to get people to move over from console, because people who spent thousands of dollars on PCs probably aren't going to want another PC, right? Like, that's just the way it is. But people who only play on Steam Deck, people who only play on the ROG Ally, people who only play on Legion Go, Switch 2, PS5, Xbox Series X, they might be looking for something new. And if you come out with a great new piece of hardware like this Steam Frame and a new game to go with it, which is Half-Life 3, I mean, you're cleaning up. I don't see any way that that could fail, and this is just really exciting. And I know the whole philosophy with the Steam Deck that worked out was using one chip across 3 different SKUs. I think with this one, they can kind of get away with having different SKUs with different performance. We'll just have to wait and see though. I don't think this thing is too far off, whether it's at the end of this year, the beginning of next year, or the end of next year. Either way, time flies very fastly, which really blows. So I don't think we'll be speculating too much longer on this. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Is this something exciting for you? What do you think about the Steam Frame name? I'd love to hear from you. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.